welcome back. In exciting news, I finally have my first in-person costume event scheduled for like the last year and a half, and I'm really excited, but it's going to be outdoors in the middle of July, and that's gonna be hot. So I'm planning on making a nice lightweight cotton dress so that I do not melt like the Wicked Witch of the West. And I'm going for something like this dress out of my Janet Arnold book. I really like the apron front. I probably won't do the train because I don't think I have enough fabric. Because I'm going to try using this sheet that I bought at the thrift store for less than $10, and I hope there's enough fabric. I only got one sheet because that's all they had, and there isn't any more if there isn't enough. So, like, fingers crossed I can cut out all of my pieces. I will probably have to piece a lot of things. I'm just kind of hoping for the best. The first thing I did was unpick all the hems, hoping that just that few extra inches will be enough. So even after picking apart all the seams, it looks like my skirt is going to take up most of my fabric because I still have to cut a second panel and all of my bodice pieces, so this is going to be interesting. So I just cut out my skirt pieces. I wanted to cut my biggest pieces first because it's a lot easier to piece tiny bodice pieces than it is to piece your whole rectangle skirt piece. And I have a surprising amount left over. I know it doesn't look like much, but this is a lot more than I expected to have, so I think this is actually going to work out okay. Time to move on to the bodice pieces. I cut each piece individually, making sure to mark each and every notch. I did my best to line up the plaid pattern across all of my pieces and managed to only slightly make one mistake, which isn't too bad for plaid. To make sure each piece is a perfect mirror of the other side, I cut one side first and then lay it on top of my fabric until the pattern is perfectly lined up underneath. Then cut again. So I just finished cutting out all my pieces and I have leftover fabric? I was not expecting this. Maybe. Just maybe this will be enough. I could do some detachable long sleeves, which I've been thinking about and thought I didn't have enough for, but maybe I do. I flatlined each piece to white cotton for extra stability, and then finished the edges with my serger. Next, I sewed up all my seams and carefully bound the neckline with bias binding. It always seems to me like Regency bodices go together so quickly. I used a Sense and Sensibility pattern as a base, but I think I made so many changes to it it's no longer the same pattern. I made up my own bodice lining and apron front patterns and really only used the skirt and back pieces from the original pattern. Okay, bodice is looking pretty good. Figured out this little tie situation. We've got the backs looking really nice and smooth. And I think it's time for sleeves next. Okay, I have both sleeves partly assembled, and I just wanted to share this trick that it is so much easier if you have a gathered sleeve with a band like this to do it flat before you do your seam. Because not only can you adjust your gathers with being able to see the whole thing all at once, also
This is now all one seam going on your underarm, so if you ever need to adjust this, you just need to open this seam instead of taking apart the whole thing, and I think that's pretty handy.
An important step I like to do when I set sleeves is to pin my sleeve in place and then check how it looks on a dress form. This way I can see ahead of time if anything looks wonky, and then I'll be able to fix it without having to pull out my seam ripper. And then once it looks good, I go right ahead and sew it in by machine. The front of my skirt will be held in place by tying around the back, so I added the world's tiniest belt loops on each side back seam to help keep the ties in place. I added these before sewing on the skirt so that the seam allowance from the belt loops would be hidden right inside the seam. Okay, and here we have our 2 little loops to thread our waist tie through, and they should be nice and small and not too annoying. Okay, so before attaching my lining to my fashion fabric, I've put a little bit of bias tape, and I did 2 little eyelets, and I've threaded this little cord through so that I can pull a little drawstring at the top of my apron front. And now when I sew this on, all of that can just be sandwiched in there and ready to go. Hope that works. I decided to line my apron front piece before doing the darts so that they're easier to alter later if needed. I also pleated my skirt to fit the bodice using mystical pleating magic, also known as eyeballing it and hoping for the best. Okay, so I'm doing my at-home all-by-myself fittings. This was a little bit funky, but I need to do a few adjustments, like this was sitting a little funny. I want to add another belt loop on the side because this keeps drooping, so I want to keep that in the right spot. And I also need to bring up some of the back because the back of my skirt is hanging a little too low, so I'm just gonna take this up a little bit. And that's really it. I'm pretty close. I'm pretty happy with how this is looking so far. So back to sewing. Please let me know in the comments if you too do quick fitting alterations while still in your corset so you could try it on again just to check. Once I was completely happy with the fit, I went ahead and pressed all my pleats nicely, serged any remaining raw edges, and I also finished off the long belt tie, which looks ridiculously long, but is enough to make a really cute bow in the back. I also unashamedly did most of my finishing by machine because who is going to notice? It turns out I did, in fact, have enough leftover fabric to cut long sleeves. I'm really excited because they'll make this dress extra versatile. I love seeing extant dresses that have changeable options like removable long sleeves or day and evening bodices. I finished the top of each sleeve extension with wide bias binding, which should keep it nice and neat for basting into the band of the puffed sleeves for whenever I want to wear them. Okay, so last part of this project is I want to make a little chemisette to wear underneath the dress so that I don't get sunburned. And I think I'm going to go with this one out of the Janet Arnold book, because it'll cover all the way to the neck, keep me nice and protected, and it's got this cute little ruffle at the top. And the pattern for this one looks pretty simple. Just a little front and a little back, and then add a ruffle, so I think I'll just make up my own little pattern and see where that gets us. Instead of gridding out the pattern straight from the book, I just draped a quick pattern on my dress form with some scrap paper, using the shapes in the pattern book as a general guide.
Since this is a small piece worn partly covered up, I wasn't super worried about it being perfect. Once I was happy with the general shape, I traced it out on fresh paper and corrected all my lines to make sure nothing was wobbly. Then I cut it out of white muslin, tracing out seam allowance around each piece. I French seamed the 2 shoulder seams and hand hemmed all edges that were on the bias. I also machine sewed a channel into each of the hems to run a ribbon through to keep it in place. We're looking pretty good so far, but I feel like it looks like I'm making a pilgrim costume right now. Okay, so I think instead of doing a pleated collar out of the same fabric, I'm going to use this pretty embroidered eyelet lace that's the same kind of color and material as the rest of my chemisette, and I think that will make a cute, pretty little collar and a lot fancier than I would do with just a straight rectangle. So let's give that a try. The finishing touch was the neckties, for which I braided together a small cord with a tassel end. And she is done! This was a really fun, really quick project that I'm super excited to wear. I love having simple cotton pieces in my wardrobe for light summer wear, and I really can't think of another historical period that has fewer, lighter layers to wear in the summer heat. Underneath this dress, I'm wearing the shift, corset, and petticoat that I previously made for another gown. I love the adjustability of this dress since it relies entirely on ties and pins to close.
hope you enjoyed coming on this journey with me. Please stick around if you'd like to see more sewing adventures like this one.